Hello, everybody out in Parent Tween Connection world. Welcome to our second conversation on this third day of Empower-a-thon. I am super excited to have Lindsay McCarthy with us. Now, if any of you know the concept of Miracle Mornings, Lindsay's actually the co-author of Miracle Mornings for Parents and Families and the Miracle Morning for Parents and Families playbook. So, Lindsay, first, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
For those of you I haven't had a chance to meet, I'm Clarissa Constantine. I'm the founder of the Parent Tween Connection, where we connect parents to each other and the professionals who can support them. And the Parent Tween Foundation is our charitable division, which our entire mission is to bridge the financial gap that so often exists between families and the resources that can help them. So yes, this is, Lindsay is very gracious and agreed to speak as part of our inaugural Empower-a-thon fundraiser. As you listen, you get nuggets. I know you're going to get nuggets. We're going to say, hey, would you say thank you by making a donation through the link that identifies Lindsay as the speaker so that we can launch the foundation and start helping some families. We just got our approval in December. So Lindsay, a second thank you for being part of the fundraiser aspect today.
Yeah, and congrats on that. And I'm excited to help you out.
Awesome. All right. So for folks who aren't familiar with housekeeping, if you're listening or tuning in, you might be in our Facebook group, you might be watching on our LinkedIn page or on our YouTube channel. If you're in our Facebook group and you have questions or comments or thoughts, please comment on the live. They pop up for us. We can see them. If you're watching via LinkedIn or YouTube, we're not going to be fielding questions from there, just so that you know. But first of all, Lindsay, let's launch this by talking briefly, before we get into family meetings. Let's talk about the whole concept of a miracle morning.
Yeah.
Where do you start?
In a nutshell, the miracle morning is waking up before you have to, in order to kind of put your oxygen mask on before assisting others.
Mm-hmm. So I started it probably 20 years ago, and I still actually keep some components. I'm not religious about every component every day, but do you want to walk folks through kind of what the acronym stands for, or what the acronym is and what it stands for, just to give an idea of like kind of your perspective of where you're coming from as we go into talking about family meetings?
For sure. So there's actually two acronyms in our book. There's one for parents and there's one for kids. Mm-hmm. So the parent acronym is SAVERS, which stands for silence, affirmations, visualization, exercise, reading, and scribing. So Hal, the original author of The Miracle Morning, says, take some time in the morning to do those 6 things. It could be 6 minutes, it could be an hour, whatever time you have, go ahead and do those 6 things. When Mike and I started doing the Miracle Morning, we had pretty young children. We had a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old, and our kids kept interrupting our Miracle Morning. So our ultimate solution to that was to invite them to have their own version. And one day my son said, Mom, I don't get it. Why do I have to save my life every day? And hence a new acronym was born for children called CHARMS, which stands for creativity, health, affirmations, reading, meditation, and we added one called service. And so those are the 6 things that our kids kind of focus on, and not necessarily in the morning. We have a rule in our house that you just have to finish your charms before you even ask for any screen time.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay. And say them one more time.
Charms is creativity, health, affirmations, reading, meditation, and service.
Love it. Love it. So for anyone listening, I mentioned to Lindsay as we were getting ready for our conversation today that I am such a believer in those things that can set your mind right in the morning, or like you said, for kiddos, like before they go and do the other things that they want to do, that I knew when we had an event that I wanted to invite her to be a participant. And so when I was reaching out to speakers, I was like, hey, what are things that you feel passionate about or that show up in the work that you do with families that you would want to talk about. And so one of the ideas that Lindsay proposed was how to have a family meeting. And we've never had a conversation about family meetings in anywhere in our podcast or any of our YouTube, Facebook lives. So that like kind of jumped off the paper and hit me in the head. So that was my thought process, Lindsay, in case I didn't share that. But so let's start with like, what is a family meeting and what purpose does it serve?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory, but having a family meeting is just a dedicated space where your family gets together and you all kind of get on the same page with things.
Okay. Does it have to be like a sitting down at the dinner table? Can it be while we're out to dinner? Can it be while we're, if it's a mom and daughter, like, does it have to involve everybody? Like, let's get into it. Like, how do we create it?
Yeah. So kind of a mantra we live by is flexibility within structure. So the Miracle Morning kind of follows that, because even though there's a loose structure of the savers or charms, within that, there's a lot of flexibility. So our family meetings kind of run the same way. There's a loose structure that we've created where we do gratitudes, we go over our goals, we go over our values, and then it's pretty open-ended. It's like whatever anybody else wants to talk about. And no, it doesn't have to be a formal meeting where we're sitting around a table with all our notebooks out. A lot of times we do it on the road in the car, and we'll just be like, okay, let's do the gratitude showers, and we'll just do it on the road.
And so how old are your kids now? I know you said that they were pretty young when you started this, but I'm assuming that wasn't yesterday.
Right. So now they're 10 and 14.
Okay. So, the four of you are together, whether you're in the car, I mean, especially as they're aging into the teenage years with all of the activities and these kinds of things, like I imagine it becomes a little bit more challenging to get everyone in the same place at the same time. So like, how much time do you guys, in your family, how much time do you set aside, and what have you found works for other families?
Yeah. So we usually set aside 30 to 45 minutes.
Okay.
Unless we know there's something on the agenda that's going to take a little bit more time. For instance, a couple of weeks ago, our kids just got these Apple Watches, and one of our structures is we have a screen time contract in our house, and their watches were not on there yet because they had just gotten them. So I was like, at our family meeting this week, I really want to have, revisit the screen time contract, and we'll go over that and add the Apple Watches in there so that it's not just a free for all. And the kids are like, okay.
All right. So is it you pretty much try to keep the same time every week, or is it like as long as it gets done on Saturday, or like,
yeah,
because I'm trying to think, like, how do people implement it, right? Like, so if they've never done this, where do we start? Same day, same time? What do you recommend?
We always recommend choosing a time that would work consistently, like either once a week or every other week, where if you always have dinner on Sunday nights, like put your family meeting right before or after dinner. So we always like to what's called habit stacking. So if you already have a habit in place, like, oh, our family always does dinner on Tuesday nights at the taco place, like, okay, let's do our family meeting then, because it's already something that's happening.
Okay. So that's one of the ways. I know one of the things that you wanted to talk about was like how to actually get people to show up, because especially as we get into these older ages and they've got all the things going on, getting them to be there with you is going to become more challenging. So that's one way that we can do it. What other suggestions do you have about how to actually get them to participate?
I mean, food always works, toddlers to teenagers. So
true.
Yes, if our kids are reluctant day of, I usually bring out a special snack. I'm like, okay, if you come to the meeting, we'll have this special snack.
Okay.
And the other one that especially works more for the older ones is the takeaway clause. It's like, okay, you don't have to come to the meeting, but if you don't show up, we're going to set your goals for the week, and you might not like them.
All right. So that takes me back then to like the structure. I know you mentioned you started with gratitude. But then, like, what are other components that should be included? And like, who keeps track of this? And, is there a deadline? Like, you have to tell me by X o'clock on Saturday before our Sunday meeting or something like that. You want to talk about something.
Right. So, I mean, ours is not as structured as you may imagine, but we do always start with gratitude because Mike and I feel like gratitude just it sets the stage for the mindset we want to have in the meeting. And after gratitudes, we also share high point moments from the week, which is another thing that just, there's so many little things that we forget that happen throughout the week. And if we don't take time to like jot them down and, look through our phones and be like, oh yeah, that was really fun when we went to play miniature golf, or, oh, I got to meet a friend for lunch this week. And, my kids might have no idea that I did that. But when I share it in that moment, and there's little things that happen in our kids' day that we have no idea until they share that at the meeting. So that's kind of the second thing. Another thing that's really important to us is our family values, which in the playbook, there's a whole exercise to create your unique family values, which that's kind of like our bread and butter exercise that we do at every family mastermind that we run. So we actually will recite our family values, and sometimes we'll even ask the kids like, well, what's a time in the week that you were being a servant leader? And then they become these more living documents instead of just like, oh, something we did that one time and then they hang on the wall and they look pretty. It's like, no, we want our kids to know our family values so well that they actually help guide their decision-making process.
Sure. Absolutely.
And like, you're not going to know that unless we articulate it and review it. So the family meeting is another time for us to actually do that. And then just logistics stuff. It's like the goals for the week and the schedule for the week. And then.
So if you're cool with it, I'd like to dig a little bit more into the whole idea of like goals for the week, because I don't know that parents always set goals for the week. Maybe they do if they're in a sales environment, professionally, or if they're entrepreneurial, or, in some case where they've got to make sure that they're performing, if you will, right? But I don't know necessarily that many families set goals between partners if it is a partnered family, if we have partnered parents, or that we're even talking to kids about what's the goal for the week. So how does that fit in?
So you're absolutely right. I think statistically speaking, like 3% of the population actually writes their goals down and only like 1% actually reviews them and tracks them. So if we can get our kids into, first, the parents modeling that behavior for them, and then second, teaching our kids how to set appropriate goals, like what is a SMART goal, and okay, you want something we do for our kids is they always have a fun goal and a hard goal. So like they're only working with 2 goals here. And usually the hard one is something school related. Like I think my son's right now, he goes to a specialized entrepreneurial school where they set their own pace. So he's on track to finish level 8 this year. And so that's like his hard goal, but then we have him break it down. We're like, okay, what does that mean to you this week? What do you need to focus on? And he's like, okay, I have to get a certain percentage on Khan and read 10 pages in my book this week to stay on track. And we're like, great, there's your hard goal. And then his fun one, it was doing a 360 on a wake surfboard, but then he broke his elbow. So right now his PT is his fun goal.
That's a bummer.
Yeah, he's having surgery tomorrow to get the pins out.
Oh, yay. I mean, at least they're coming out, I guess.
Yeah. So
they
had to put him in to hold it in place. And now that it's healed, they take him out, I guess.
Yeah. All right. So your family includes the gratitude and then the high points from the week and
Mhm.
then the goals.
Goals,
Anything else?
values,
Goals,
and
goals and
schedule.
values, right? Sorry.
Yep.
What else?
And then it's open-ended after there. So, if we have several systems in our house, one is called the STAR system, which is screen time, um, allowance, responsibilities, and rewards. And so sometimes that's not functioning properly, and we might have to have a little discussion about, hey, why is it not getting done? Is it mom's fault? Is it dad's fault? Like how, or like what are the solutions? So
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we really want most of our family meetings to be solution based,
Right.
and then we travel a lot. So a lot of times it's like, okay, we have some travel coming up. What do you guys want to do when we're in Europe for the summer?
Mm-hmm.
So they
Right.
get to be a part of those discussions, and it's not just top down management all the time, like mom and dad
Sure.
saying, "This is where we're going. This is what's happening." It's like
Right.
they actually get to have a voice and be like, "Oh, I really want to go to Hawaii this year." And we're like, "Okay, we'll write that down and we'll see if we can make that happen."
Right. Um, do you think that there's value in for folks that want to have like kind of an outline of the things to include? Do you think there's value in specifically having a place to identify or to voice what your challenges are?
Mhm.
To have, an opportunity to be like, "Hey, let's see if we can try to solve this or help the other person or whatever." Like maybe it's, dad's struggling with something at work, nothing says the 10-year-old or 14-year-old might, they could totally have a creative idea that dad might not have thought of as an example.
Mhm. Yeah, I totally think there's value in that, and that is actually something we do occasionally with our kids is like,
Right.
"Hey, what is something you're" we kind of work that into the goals, I guess, is
Okay.
the discussion like, "Okay, what you didn't reach your goal last week for whatever reason. Like, let's talk about that. What was the challenge? Where are the solutions? How can we?" So
Mhm.
for my daughter, her homework every night is to read 10 minutes, and often we miss the mark. And so then we have to look at it. It's not entirely on her because she's dyslexic and she's still learning to read. So like a lot of times it's like, oh, mom had something planned every single night and, didn't have good communication with the babysitter that night, or we tried to do it too late at night. So maybe the
Sure.
solution is we do it right when we get home from school. Maybe we can even do it on the car ride. She can read in the back seat with her brother on the way to school. And like,
Right.
so
Right.
there's all these solutions, like how can we be more efficient with it?
Mhm.
Um, and it is a fun exercise for the kids to kind of be a part of that brainstorming of where are the solutions and how can we say yes to more
Absolutely.
things.
Well, and it gives them, I mean, so many parenting coaches that I've connected with over the last few years with Parent Tween Connections, so many of them talk about like your kids have to have a voice, they have to have some kind of a choice, they have to have some kind of agency in things.
Yes.
Because like you said, if it's all top down, not only is there, potential mental health implications, but it's just not preparing them for the real world.
Mhm.
And the conversation we had this morning on resiliency is like there's going to be adversity, but if you know that there's a place that you can talk to your support team about it,
Mhm.
like at your family during the family meeting,
Yep.
um hey, here's a place that I know I can have this conversation. um I just had another thought and it completely went out of my head. I have no idea where I was going with that.
Sure.
Um, would you change anything up? I know you said that you recommend either weekly or biweekly. If a
Mhm.
family was like, look, weekly is just insurmountable, or maybe it's
Mhm.
um divorced parents or separated parents and
Mhm.
it's a single parent wanting to do it, but the kids and this parent are only together every other week.
Mhm.
Is there anything else that you would recommend implementing, like even like a text touch base, like this week, parent A is reaching out to kid A, or parent B is reaching out to kid B, as an example. Or, if the parent and child are split because of a travel or whatever, like what other things could support if there's a longer period?
Yeah, I mean, I love the idea of the text thread, especially when the kids are getting older. Like I said, our kids just got Apple Watches, and my daughter's texting me yesterday from school, like, can I go to Starbucks after school with my friends? And, so I think the idea behind the family meeting is really having these touch points and staying in communication. So if your family has a text thread and that's working for you, like, do that. That could be a daily check-in, like, hey, mom's here, dad's here, Tyler's here. Like, these are the activities for the day, just so everybody's on the same page.
Sure.
And, I definitely think there's value in coming together in person as often as possible. Like, I mean, we pretty much have family dinners every single night. So at family dinner, we're talking about what's happening the next day. So there's that daily touch base. And my husband and I split time driving the kids to and from school. And there's lots of conversations happening on car rides. They're not structured, but I think the more often you can kind of have these touch points with your kids, because ultimately it's a relationship, like you're building the relationship with your kids. And the earlier you can do that, and the more you can model conversations for your kids. Another question we get a lot is, how young is too young to be at the family meeting? And we say they're never too young. Like, even if they're just sitting in their high chair having a snack while you're having a conversation around them, like, they're learning. They're understanding how the family dynamics work, and they're still part of the conversation in their own way. Even if they're not verbalizing anything.
Well, and they're getting the idea that this is important and that this is a practice within our family.
Yeah. And I think the earlier you start these, the lot less resistance you'll get when they're actually teenagers.
No, absolutely. Because I totally agree. Because I think you're establishing foundations of, like, this is when we can talk about hard things. Not that you can't talk about hard things in other places or at other times, but there are things that they're going to face that we didn't face during our teenage years, just because they weren't things then, Exactly. And so the earlier that you can start establishing those even just simple conversations, the conversations that you don't think matter a lot, So then, to your point about resistance as they get older, what if we've got a family that, has kids who are your kids' ages now that haven't set this practice, but mom or dad is listening and they want to set the practice? What recommendations would you have about introducing this concept? Because every teenager is going to be like, to something that mom and dad suggests at some point, right? And so if this is the one that's like that kind of like rolling eyes, sighing at you, like, how do we approach it?
Man, I mean, I'm not an expert, first of all. So this is just me being a parent and say, from my own experience. I mean, that takeaway clause, it does work, but it also might get resistant for the kids too. Like, hey, you can come to this meeting. I don't know. That's a really hard question. I wish I knew the answer.
Well, and the reality is that it's going to be different for every family, right? But I think my thinking was that it goes back to, like, what are the things that you get them to show up, right? Like the food, like we make it a special treat, or we make it a special activity, and then be like, hey, maybe not even introduce it as a quote unquote concept of, like, we're going to start holding family meetings, but maybe it's more just like, okay, we're going to go, I'm just going to take the kids to dinner on Sunday night, and I'm going to be like, hey, what are you guys thinking about for this week? And just start asking the questions, and then just start kind of making it a habit that they don't even realize that it's a thing, that it's just a regular conversation that you're initiating as the parent. So I'm curious, for anyone who's listening, if you have implemented this when your kids are a little bit older, what did you find successful? Like, let's help other parents implement it, because I can see so many good things coming from it, but I also see some like
I do think your approach of like not making it a big thing, to just be like, oh, we booked a reservation at a restaurant on Saturday, and like, hey, we're gonna leave our phones in the car and like,
right,
we're just gonna have this family conversation.
sure.
Because
Awesome.
I mean, like I said, our kids kind of are in this bubble where they're at these specialized schools and there's not a lot of electronics and things. But when I see kids from like public schools, they're like so attached to their devices all the time.
Well, and that's definitely, I mean, it's just a sign of the times, I mean, there's plenty of adults that are equally attached, you know what I mean?
Yeah. But I really do think it comes back to that modeling piece all the time. Like, we can't expect more from our kids than we expect from ourselves. And
Agreed.
if we're attached to our phones all the time, they're going to be attached to their phones all the time.
Absolutely.
If we're showing up for family dinner, they'll show up for family dinner. If we're, maybe you just start with your spouse, having family meetings with your spouse. And
right.
Because that's what I always say about the Miracle Morning too. People are like, how do I get my kids to do this? I'm like, I don't think it's about getting them to do it. It's about you doing it, you modeling that behavior, and they're going to notice changes in you and be like, oh, maybe they'll get curious and be like, what's different? What's been happening? I've been noticing these things. And so I really do think it's about you. And if you really want to start doing the family meetings, maybe start with your own Miracle Morning and establish that habit, and then you can kind of work out from there.
I also just had the thought of, maybe it's like, for your gratitude and your goals and your values, it could be as simple as putting it on writing it out on a sheet of paper, like the week of May 15th. My gratitude this week is for, and my goals for this week are, and my values that I'm focusing most on this week, for example, is, and pop it on the refrigerator, maybe, just so that it's something that they're seeing.
It's visible.
If they can't see you doing the action, because some of that is like, they're not going to see it. They're not going to see you being grateful or saying thank you,
Right.
So, gosh, we
another thought I had too, like when we started doing family meetings, our kids were little, but there's just as much resistance from a toddler as there is a teenager.
I suppose there's that. Fair point.
And so like we started really small we started doing the exercises that are in the playbook. I think our first one was, we established a bedtime routine, because a great Miracle Morning starts the night before. Sure. So that was really the first thing we kind of sat down and established as a system in our house, is like, how are we going to do bedtime? And, we sat down with our kids at, I think they were like 7 and 3. And we're like, what do you want your bedtime to look like? Do you want to do bath first or stories first? Or, like, what order do you want it in? And, even at those young ages, they were able to be like, have a say, have some autonomy, have some choices. That,
right.
This is how I want my bedtime to go.
And that's, you've used the term system a lot along the way, and this is maybe a conversation that we can continue another time. But it seems to me, a lot of parenting coaches talk about having structure and having rules and this, kind of this, that, and the other thing. But I like your take on it of the term system, because it's asking them like, hey, how do we create the system? If they create it, they're going to be a whole lot more likely to participate willingly in it. Right? Toddlers or teenagers. But what a great way to give them that agency and that influence about something that, like, as a parent, I imagine you probably really don't care what order it all happens in, as long as they get to bed at a reasonable hour, right? As long as they are teeth brushed and washed and story read, and prayer perhaps for some folks as part of a nighttime routine or meditation. But like, as long as it all gets done, who cares what order it happens in?
Right.
So what a great way to give them that flex. Love it. I could chat with you all day, my friend. I am so grateful that you even opened up my Facebook message when I first reached out to you, and that you're willing to participate with us. And so for anyone who's gotten nuggets that you can implement with your family, like I said, Lindsay has offered her time to share her insights with us as part of the Empower-thon fundraiser. So I will make sure that her link is on all of the things everywhere. And actually, I think it already is. So if you look at the description for the event, wherever it is you're tuning in from, you should be able to have her find the link, but I'll go comment it as well. So Lindsay, thank you. Yeah. And one of the things for listeners who are tuning in, we have a little competition going on, friendly competition between our speakers, that whichever speaker helps us generate the most in donations, that we will take 20% of whatever their donations are and donate them to a family-oriented nonprofit of their choice. And I'm just going back to double check. You mentioned Camp Hill Special School. Can you give us a little shout out about them and why they're important to you?
Yeah. So actually my sister-in-law is their main fundraiser, but it's an amazing school that helps kids and parents and teens of who are on the spectrum or have other neurodivergencies or even physical disabilities. And they just do amazing work there. So every time I can support them, I do.
That's awesome. Where are they located?
They're in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Which is where I grew up. So
very cool. Well, I love it. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. And hopefully this isn't the last conversation we have here.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye.